I dance, make it hurt.
Shalom everyone. Today's video will be on an iceberg that was compiled based off of the content from this channel and a few various other places sourced in the Sepher Yirah book series and a few other select places from the Lurianic Kabbalah. That being said, this iceberg was compiled maybe 9 or so months ago by a very close person to the channel. I won't mention his name, but we are very grateful that you decided to put the effort in and make this iceberg. That being said, this will be part 1 of the iceberg, and we'll continue the series going forward. Our first Kabbalistic iceberg, part 1. Level 1. Aleph separates Mem from Shin. Hinted at in Sepher Yirah, it says the 22 foundation letters, 3 mothers, 7 doubles, and 12 elementals. The 3 mothers are Aleph, Mem, and Shin. Found again also in the Zohar. Again, the letters Aleph, Mem, Shin rolled as before in order to settle in the tabernacle. Mentioned in Sepher Yirah books 1, 4, and 5. We find that Aleph comes from the Hebrew word for air, and Mem comes from Mayim, and Shin comes from Esh, or fire. Mem also has a Sophite form, or final form, which represents the earth. Thus, the general concept is that the air will separate liquids and solids from the light. So we find in our environment, the land and sea are separated from the stars above us by the atmosphere. And we find in our face that our eyes that see the light are separated from our mouth taking liquids and solids by our nose that breathes the air, and our ears that receive sound by the air. We find that this pattern is also upon the body, for our head, which moves our body via light, is separated from our stomach processing liquids and solids by our lungs that breathes the air. We find the same thing with every animal. Their eyes that see the light are separated from their mouth taking liquids and solids by their nose that breathes the air, and their head, which moves their body via light, is separated from their stomach processing liquids and solids by their lungs that breathes the air. We find, as with every plant, that they receive their color from the light and utilize photosynthesis, separated from their roots in the earth drawing water by their leaves converting atmospheric substance. This probably is not what a dinosaur actually looked like. They were probably feathered, but nonetheless, their eyes that see the light are separated from their mouth taking liquids and solids by their nose that breathes the air, and their brain, which moved their body via light, is separated from their stomach processing liquids and solids by their lungs that breathes the air. We find that every planet is a body of solids or liquids and solids separated from a centralized star by space, and that this crosses over 100 billion galaxies. Both the environment and the system itself are defined by the same law. We find on the smallest level, electrons are circling protons and neutrons separated by space, and so we see the principle here. As seen on the Ilonot, or a scroll that was recently revealed on my channel, we can see the principles of Aleph separates Mem from Shin, the eyes that see the light separated from the mouth taking liquids and solids by the nose that breathes the air. We find that this concept even permeates angels in the heavens. We see that their eyes that see the light are separated from their mouth, liquids and solids by their nose that breathes the air, and they have a head separated from their stomach by their lungs. We see this same principle in our dreams, which means that it transcends the dream realm and transcends the heavens. We see it upon ourselves, and we see it upon others, both man and woman. We see it upon animals, and we also see it upon all deities of all religions. If there was an idol that was displayed, it too is defined by the exact same principle. We find even in Gehinnom and Sheol, if there were demons, they too are defined by the same principle. We find the same thing with the plants, so on and so forth. This is the unifying factor. And if we were just to see this one thing, we would have world peace. By the word of his mouth, he created the heavens and the earth. This refers to the concept that the heavens and the earth were created by the word, or the Lashon HaKodesh, this being those holy letters. As we just analyzed in the previous level, that Aleph separates Mem from Shin, we see how this permeated through all of reality and across a multiplicity of forms. This collective state is also seen in the heavens. It is also seen as demonstrated there in Gehinnom and Sheol, or the concepts of hell or purgatory. Thus we see that this law permeates above all of these levels, including the heavens. Hinted at in Book 15 of the Zohar, it says, "Come and see. The first subject of the Torah we give to children is the alphabet. This is a matter that mankind cannot comprehend, nor can it rise in their minds, not to mention saying it with their mouths. Even supernal angels and the most sublime cannot comprehend it, as these matters are the mysteries of the holy name." We learn from this that neither the supernal angels or the most sublime can understand anything about the letters, and certainly not mankind. This being said, they cannot declare how they came into existence, but we just saw the divine pattern permeating above all of these levels. Let's move on. The crown jewel. As mentioned when discussing Aleph separates Mem from Shin, Sepher Yetzirah stated there are 3 mother letters, Aleph, Mem, and Shin, 7 double letters, which are Beit, Gimel, Fe, Kaf, Resh, and Dalet, and 12 elemental letters, Zain, Sadi, Tet, Kof, Vav, Nun, Chet, He, Samech, and Lamed, Yud, Ain. The concept of the crown jewel is that it is a jewel upon the crown of the Ancient of Ancients, the Atika Kadisha, the Ancient Holy One. The use of the crown jewel, as Aleph separates Mem from Shin, are called mother letters. They, in essence, correspond to the faculties of sound. An example, Shin to the tongue, which makes the sound thereof, S. Aleph to the throat, which makes the sound thereof, A. And Mem to the lips, which make the sound thereof, M. The idea here is that every other letter is formed by a combination thereof, or the use of one of these faculties. Thus they are called mothers, in that they emanate, as it were, the other letters. The combinations of these things are how to navigate the use of that crown jewel. For example, the double letter Beit. It means house in Hebrew. And if we were to analyze these like hieroglyphics, it would be air, houses, water. Well, we see this in the Hebrew word for breath, hevel, and we see this in English as the letter Beit is the letter B. We see it in house in the terms of box, so on and so forth. We also see it in terms of the principle that was just applied in the word breath, as the letter B in the word breath is air that houses water. We see this concept in the pronunciation of the sound, in example, ba, which cannot be made without the use of the lips and the throat. As it is forwards, air houses water, it is also backwards, water houses air. This is in the instance of the word, for example, bubble, which is water that houses air. We see this very literally in air houses water, an example why the sky is blue, because air houses water, and vice versa, why the water is blue, because water houses air, an example H2O. The use of the crown jewel navigates the secret of the 22 letters. This should suffice for the explanation. These concepts are described in great detail in Book 1, Book 4, and Book 5 of the Sepher Yirah series. Simsum, or restriction. This refers to the concept, in the beginning the endless restricted itself. In the beginning was the endless, and the endless expounded to the boundary of the endless, and there was no end to its boundary. There was no vacancy. And when it arose in his desire, that there might be a desire, he restricted himself from all directions. The endless restricted itself from all directions, precisely in the center, creating a vacancy. this being the place where all of the worlds, both upper and lower, would come into existence. Simultaneously, it would allow the endless to both be a part of and separated from the existence. Circular on the highest and lowest levels, linear in between. Continuing forward from our concept of the Simsum, circular on the highest and lowest levels and linear in between refers to the act in which the surrounding endless would pour into this vacancy that was created as a result of the restriction. Regarding the restriction, it withdrew its presence from all directions, this of course creating a circle. The idea here is that at the highest level of existence, everything is circular. And we also learned that it gathered in the center. Thus we learned that at the smallest level, everything is also revolving in circular aspects, in the secret of electrons revolving protons and neutrons, so on and so forth. We find everything is linear in between in the secret of, after the restriction, the surrounding light would pour into that vacancy. And that surrounding light poured in the secret of what's called the Or Yashar, or the straight light. From this, we learned that everything is circular on the highest level, on the lowest level, and linear in between. As an example, we are human beings that are linear aspects, but we are a composition of revolving things at the lowest level and exist on planets revolving things at the highest level. This concept is described in Book 4 of the Sepher Yirah series in Gate 6, called The Restriction. We can see the concepts being laid out here of circular on the highest and lowest levels and linear in between, straight light. We also see at the planetary level, everything is revolving in circular aspects, and at the smallest levels, it is also the same. 11 fronts and 11 backs to the Sephirot. To understand this concept, we must first understand the secret of the heart spark, or what is known as the 231 gates. Mentioned in Sepher Yetzirah chapter 2 verse 5, it says, how did he do this? He permuted them, weighed them, and transformed them. An example, the letters. Aleph with them all, and all of them with Aleph. Beit with them all, and all of them with Beit. They repeat in a cycle and exist in 231 gates. Regarding these 231 gates, it states, according to the early Kabbalists, the 231 gates are alluded to in the name Israel. In Hebrew, Israel is spelled Yod Shin Resh Aleph Lamed. These letters can also spell out Yesh Resh Lamed Aleph, which has a gematria value of 231, which literally means there are 231. The Midrash states that at the beginning of creation, Israel arose in thought. The name Israel thus alludes to the fact that creation took place through these 231 gates. According to the later Kabbalists, these 231 gates are what remained in the vacated space that preceded creation. That vacated space, of course, referring to the Simsum. It is also called the hard spark, as will be demonstrated here in the Zohar. It states in Book 1 of the Zohar, in section 1 called Make an Engraving upon the Supernal Light, with the beginning of the manifestation of the king's will, that is when the king desired to emanate and create the world, a hard spark made an engraving upon the supernal light. This hard spark, which emanated from the most concealed of all concealed things, from the secret of the endless light, took a shapeless form. The spark was then inserted into the center of a circle that was neither white nor black nor red nor green nor any color at all. When it began its measurements, it created colors that shone into the empty space and the engraving. From within the spark, from this hard spark, a fountain spouted, from which the shades down below received their colors. A disciple of the Arizal compiled a book hundreds of years ago called Omek Hamelech, and in this particular text, he describes a secret regarding the 231 gates. As we learned, Aleph with every letter with Aleph, so on and so forth. We find that when this is done, they create 231 combinations. And here, when writing out all of those combinations to be listed, we find that he mentions here that Aleph is the partsuf of Kether, Beit is the partsuf of Chokmah, Gimel is the partsuf of Bina. We continue onwards, Dalet is the partsuf of Da'as, so on and so forth. So we find that the 22 Hebrew letters come to represent the themselves. However, when we arrive to the letter Lamed, we find that Lamed is the partsuf of Kether Achor, or the backside. And continuing onwards, we continue this trend, that the letter Mem is the partsuf of Hokma Achor, an example, the back. And that Nun is the back of the partsuf Bina, so on and so forth. And this will continue until the letter Tav, which is the back of the partsuf of Malchut. This heart spark is the visual representation of the 231 gate, which preceded creation. The word Israel was mentioned because the prophet Yeshayahu states, he declared the end from the beginning. This, of course, refers to the last word of the Torah, which is the word Israel, hinting to these 231 gates. And of course, we learned that these 231 gates are all that remained in the vacated space that preceded creation. We learn now that these 22 letters, in addition, are the secrets of the 11 fronts of the Sephirot and the 11 backs of the Sephirot. Our sages stated also that the 231 gates were used to create a golem. That will be discussed later. The endless garbed itself in information. This refers to the concept that within the endless, all the letters were in the mystery of a singularity and a unity, and that the endless, which is unknowable, garbed itself in information before bringing about existence. Thus it is stated in a variety of places that you will know that Hashem is the Lord, so on and so forth. This knowing is from da'as, a type of intellectual knowledge, which stands in stark contrast to many other faith and belief systems which state that he is unknowable. This also reaffirms the aspect which many philosophers made a horrible mistake in when separating creation, an example, the manifested, from the unmanifested, failing to realize that the manifested itself was brought into existence within and through and by that unmanifested thing. Therefore, the manifested is very much the aspect of Hashem. This is that information, an example, the 22 letters. One may even view this as a programming language, as demonstrated by those laws. 23 chromosome pairs. As mentioned, when discussing the 11 fronts and 11 backs, we learned of the heart spark, which was compiled of the 22 letters, and the only thing that existed or remained within the vacancy of the restriction. If the 22 letters were the essence of creation, we must find evidence for this at the smallest level. Thus we find that the 22 letters are in the secret of the chromosomes. If we look at human chromosomes at the smallest level, we'll find that there are 23 pairs. 22 of them are fixed, and the 23rd is imkalel, all of this being in direct reference to the 22 Hebrew letters of the Lashon HaKodesh. As the heart spark is found at the smallest level of existence, therefore, too, at the smallest level of existence do we find evidence for it. This refers to the pairs of those chromosomes. Bruised heel and bruised head. Returning to the concept that the 22 letters are the 11 fronts of the Sephirot as demonstrated here, and the 11 backs of the Sephirot as demonstrated here, we find that the continuation was Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud, Kaf, which was the front of Malchut. When getting to the letter Lamed, it was the back side of Kether. This is the concept of the bruised heel and the bruised head. The general principle here is that this connection gives to us the key of the golem, which the 231 gates were said to have created. Golem has a numerical value of Hokmah and may be touched on in another place. Regardless of which, the principle is that this entire tree of the face is found in this one Sephirot, an example, this Kether. How do we see this? This backside tree is like our body, and the Kether of our body would refer to our head, and within our head is the entire tree of the fronts. An example, the 2 lobes of the brain, the 2 eyes, the nose, the ear, the mouth, so on and so forth. So we find that we have a tree of the face and the Kether of the tree of our body. Malkuth is called heel, and so it was said, and he will bruise the heel. And regarding the head, it is written, and he will bruise the head. This is also the secret of our sage's statement stating that the man and the woman could not look at each other. They were back-to-back pairings, and she was taken from the side. Similarly, the secret of why the man will be ruler over the woman. An example, the face will rule over the woman. An example, the body, or the tree of the face will rule over the tree of the body. Side, Partsufim. Continuing with the understanding of the 11 fronts and the 11 backs, the bruised heel and the bruised head, we learned that the backside tree is related to the body. In this explanation, the side Partsufim refers to the serpent, an example, the body of the animals. It was said that the serpent was the craftiest amongst all of the animals, and the word crafty there is also a hint to skin, an example, the appearance of the animals. The serpent being cast on its belly refers to the body being cast sideways, and to eat the dust hints to Malkuth, because, of course, Malkuth is still connected to the backside of that Kether. Thus, what we find is that the animals have a tree of the face in the Kether of the tree of their body, yet they are still sideways, unlike the human being, which stands linearly upwards. This concept is more readily demonstratable in this image. We can see here tree on top of tree as it relates to the man, and we can see how the tree of the body was cast on its side in relation to the tree of the face for the animals. They still have a tree of the face, an example, the tooth, brain, the eyes, the nose, the ears, and the mouth, in the Kether of the tree of their body, but their body is cast on its belly, as it were, an example, sideways. Flesh and bone. Flesh and bone refer to the right and left columns, where the top of the right column is a Sepher called Chokmah and is personified by the color white, and the left column, the top of which is the color red, which alludes to Binah. Usually it's described as purple, but the left column in general is red. Binah is by the Partsufim called Ima, which refers to the woman. And this column being red hints to the fact that every woman produces red, namely from the reproductive organ. The top of the right column is the Partsufim called Abba, or father, and hints to the fact that every male produces white, namely from the reproductive organ. Flesh and bone refer to a verse that's mentioned in Sepher Yirah. It states to have wisdom and understanding, and to understand in wisdom. To have wisdom and understanding now means that the bone is in the flesh. Or wisdom, an example, the bone is in understanding, an example, the flesh, which indeed we do see this. And understand in wisdom means that the flesh is inside of the bone, an example, the bone marrow. This is all in the secret of what can I take as a witness to you, what can I liken to you. There are no questions in the Torah, only statements. Thus, what can I take as a witness to you refers to reality, for the witness is surely the heaven and the earth. Thus, the earth is a witness to this, and this is the secret of flesh and bone. 22 bones to the skull. The endless, the restriction, and the hard spark actually allude to Kether, Chokmah, and Binah of a Partsufim called Atik Yomin, or the Ancient of Days. Though we use terms like Kether, Chokmah, and Binah, one should not think that Kether and Chokmah and Binah actually apply to this place, as the Sephirot themselves have not been brought out in terms of manifestation, but rather these are used symbolically for tracking purposes. 22 bones to the skull refer to these three levels, creating the head of the Ancient of Days, or the head of the Atik Yomin. An example, the surrounding endless, the restriction, and the hard spark itself. The hard spark creates the skull of the Ancient of Days, and this skull is a composition of 22 letters. Just as the Ancient of Days has 22 that form this particular skull, so too do we have 22 bones in our skull. Another level to this is that the 231 gates are hinted to by the backs and fronts of the Sephirot, which are likened to the two halves of the brain that are housed inside of the skull, which is a composition of 22 bones. The Secret of Seven. In Book 17, Section Naso, Section 44, it states the 7 kings of the feminine principle who died. The secret of 7 refers to the 7 kings of Edom. It says here, the kings of Edom did not endure because they consisted of judgment. We have learned that prior to the time of correction of the king were prepared the most ancient among the ancient, that is, the supreme emanator, was constructing worlds and working out structures for their existence. Similarly, it states, and these are the kings that reigned in the land of Edom before there reigned any king. This, of course, referring to the secret of 7. In the book Eitzchaim by Chaim Vital, it states here that the letters Shin, Ayin, Tet, Nun, Zain, Gimel, and Sadiq are the secret of the 7 kings that died, as we just learned. Since the cortices came into existence and emerged from them, as we know, they are the letters Shin, Tet, Nun, Ayin, Zain, Gimel, and Sadiq. The explanation is that they are the force, strength, and might of the strong judgments that descended. The Satan, which is the cortices, was made from them. Creating and destroying worlds refers to the Simsum, or the restriction, in which the light withdrew upon itself. Death, as the sages reveal, means descent. And when the light of the endless restricted itself into the centralized heart spark, which was a composition of the 22 letters, it created every potential possibility. An example, Aleph with every letter and every letter with Aleph, so on and so forth. That is to say, the principle of the air blended with every principle and every principle with the principle of air, so on and so forth. What emerged first were the letters Shin, Tet, Nun, Ayin, Zain, Sadi, and Gimel. Now the letters would go from a condition of non-existence into a condition of existence. And so the first letters that emerged were the 7 letters that have 3 tagin. The tagin is the secret of the Zain, or the weapons. These are Shin, Tet, Nun, which spell the name Satan, Ayin, which is the secret of Azza, Zain, which is Azazel, the 2 Sadiq, which refer to the 2 Mashiachin, and Gimel, which is the camel serpent. These will be touched on later. These correspond to the 7 holes in our face, the 2 eyes, the 2 holes in the nose, the 2 ears, and the mouth. So just in a similar likeness, we find that the skull is in the same likeness. We'll touch on that in just a moment. Continuing onwards with the secret of 7, we find that the light of the endless descended in to the restriction, or the Simsum. And there, as we learned, it began to differentiate itself. From this, we learn that light is circular. We also learn that light is conal. We also learn that the light differentiated itself. And from this, we find that the different shades of light are by varying degrees of vibration. It striking the heart spark and passing through the heart spark teaches us that the light differentiates itself into 7 colors. Thus, when we pass white light through a prism, we find that it produces a rainbow. 7 holes in the face and 7 bones to the neck. The concept of the 7 holes to the skull and the 7 bones to the neck refer to the 7 kings that died without weapons. For as we discussed in the secret of circular on the highest and lowest levels and linear in between, that there is a circular aspect to the tree, an example, the Simsum, and there's a linear aspect to the tree, an example, the Ora Yashar, the straight light. In the same likeness, when these 7 kings first emerged from the secret of that supernal emanator and the secret of that skull, they emerged in a linear aspect, for there is a circular and a linear aspect. The linear aspect are the 7 bones in the neck. So we'll find in the neck there are exactly 7 bones, which are the secrets of Shin, Tet, Nun, Ayin, Zain, Sadi, Gimel. Satan is the secret of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is a permutation of the Hebrew word for the word neck, hinting to the fact that he's connected to this place in the neck. They emerge in the secret of the circular aspect, an example, the hard spark, which is likened to the skull. As we learned, just as the hard spark is created out of 22 letters, which are the 231 gates, for it creates 231 combinations when you do Aleph with every letter with Aleph, etc., etc., etc. We find also that there are 22 bones to our skull, from which there are 7 holes, the 2 eyes, the two nostrils, the ears, and the mouth. And when these 7 kings died without weapons before they had the secret of the crowns or tagen, discussed in another place, they emerge in a linear aspect. This linear aspect is the secret of the 7 bones in the neck. The light would pour out of this place and through this place to the shades down below, as it was mentioned in that particular place in the Zohar. And so we find that white light differentiates itself into 7 colors, etc. This concludes the first level of our iceberg. We will continue to go level by level in future videos until we reach the deepest level. If you have any questions, please link them down below. And if you would like to obtain any of the Sepher Yirah books which were mentioned in this iceberg, I will leave them in a pinned comment below. Shalom Selah.